over most of the reins to Shahan, as I believe this should be led by a youth for most part. So, as we say, some housekeeping. When you are not speaking, if you can mute, please. Sometimes we've had interruptions. We want to be hearing our esteemed guests and yourselves as you speak very clearly, because it's very, very important how you have to share. Rhoma, it's so good to see you live.
Hey, Rhoma.
And she's having a little bit of connection issues. Right. This is going to be more of a conversation. So we would like people to very much be part of it. Yes, we'll be asking our panelists some questions, but the questions are just to guide the conversation along. I would hope there are a lot of young people on this call that they will ask their questions, as well as on Facebook Live. If you drop it within the comments, our host and our rest of the team in the back will get the questions to us as we carry on with our conversation. Shahan, is there anything you would like to say before I go on?
Also, we are recording, so if anybody isn't okay with being viewed, their image and their names, you are free to take off your camera and change your name.
Your profile name, yeah.
And your profile name, picture, what have you.
Thank you for that. I clean forgot that, yes. I kind of made my panelists sign a consent form, so I was going ahead with it. So I'm going to introduce my panelists as they appear on my screen. First up is Lee Kam. Leslie is a proud world majority Brown, Trini, Carib, Indo-Chinese, Callaloo, differently abled queer dyke elder, senior. Talk about owning who you are, right? She has been a queer dyke community activist for the past 44 years, advocating for two-spirit, queer, and trans, Black people of color or bi people of color. I wasn't too sure what was the term there you wanted to say, Leslie. Youth and seniors. Anyway, she lives her life from an anti-oppression, anti-racism, anti-colonialism, and intersectional perspective. But most importantly, yes, she enjoys doubles, dancing, dim sum, a Trini lime, and a cold beverage anytime.
That's right.
Thank you, Leslie. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're always welcome. Next up is my friend Amanda.
Hi.
You're all friends, huh? But Amanda is Amanda McIntyre. She's a Trinidadian author, artist, and advocate. She's employed as an advocacy and policy specialist. Her research and writing focus on cultural studies and literary scholarship. She presented her research paper, Migration, Myths and Mass, at the Rex Nettleforth Arts Conference in Kingston in 2019. Her essay, Queering Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival, was presented at the 5th European Geographies of Sexualities Conference in Prague in 2019. Amanda is the founding director of She Right Collective, a Caribbean-based feminist organization focusing on sexual and reproductive health and rights through advocacy, scholarship, educational programs, multimedia art, medical resources, and legal interventions. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Faye. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. And Wayde, who's very much like me, really and truly hates bios. But a little bit about Wayde. His early years, as he says, were not remarkable. And in fact, it was simple. The first house he lived in was made from dirt and concrete mixed. He attended Felicity Presbyterian Primary School and then the Couver Government Secondary School. As a child and teen, he has always had an inclination for the arts, makeup, and nail polish. And every time that you see him, you notice, yes, there's the polish. His head is down because he's working on his craft. He needs to be distracted to be focused, very much like me too. His parents were not keen on academic development, but he continued his schooling and mixed education and worked very hard to read for his bachelor's degree in computing and postgraduate diploma in project management. He has worked in the public service for 10 years in library services and then spent 15 years at the UN in information management, human rights advocacy, and outreach education. And earlier this year, he shifted his path when he resigned his post at the UN, and all of this was to start up his small business and offer consultancy services to help build civil society organizations' capacities. And in his spare time, he says he fancies himself, but he is an artist. And if you see his work, and I think if you look at it behind over his right shoulder, you will see one of his pieces. Welcome, Wayde, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Faye. Thank you.
And we're on to Mr. Conrad Mitchell, also known as RAS Icon. Conrad has many monikers, and he has worked on both sides of the camera. In front as a model, he has posed nude for over 10 years. And if you did go to his Facebook page and you just delve a little bit in his photos, you may come across one or two. Fascinating. And they have been immortalized on canvas by artists around the globe, he himself as a model. As a convert to the other side of the camera, and though never formally trained, he has acquired acclaim from fashion spreads on the private Isle of Mustique for our local designer, Claudia Pigas, to the reportage of the rehearsal halls, of the London Music Orchestra. His unique eye has captured many a noteworthy image, some of which were exhibited in 2010 in his exhibition entitled Black Mankind. 6 years ago, Conrad returned to the island of Trinidad and donned yet another hat as the senior production coordinator for McFarlane Design Studios, the leading corporate event management firm in the Western Hemisphere. Once again, he has changed direction, and he is now the Trinidadian-based consultant for the International Training and Education Center for Health, ITEC. Please welcome Conrad Mitchell to the panel.
Hi.
And last, but by no means least, is Gabrielle Punch. For those who know her, often refer to her as a rebel, a risk taker with limitless creative talents, resourceful, ambitious, and also a perfectionist when it comes to her craft. In 2018, she resigned her position as the video diplomacy assistant with the US Embassy to become a full-time entrepreneur with her brand, The Punchline. This is where she crafts simple, functional, and fashionable limited edition leather bags and travel accessories. Very easy to go to Facebook, punch in The Punchline, just as it is D, Punchline, and you'll see all her stuff. Some of you may also have seen her engaging in one of her other passions, which is photography, as she has over the past 2 years covered several of our events, the LGBTQI events here in Trinidad. She was with us in Parliament in 2018 in front the Friday before Jason Jones' case was announced. She was at that case at Woodford Square taking all our photos, and she has done both of the Pride parades over the last 2 years. Gabrielle lives by the mantra, gratitude always, and strives above all else to always be true to herself. Welcome, Gabby.
Hi.
So that's a little bit about our panel. That's a little bit about our panel. Does anybody have any questions right now, or we can just jump right in? welcome. All right, just a reminder that you can send your questions, either add them here in the chat or in the comment section on our Facebook Live. Shahan, over to you, my dear.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. Good night again.
Hi.
So, Faye asked me to co-host this Generation Gap with us. So, I think we could just get into it. So, we had a couple of questions that were asked to some young folks like myself and others, and we categorized them. So, we're just gonna Q&A
A live chat.
and such like that, right? So, first question we have tonight is, how would you describe your sexual orientation and your gender identity? So, anyone on the panel can answer if they wish.
And also, at what age did you discover your orientation and sexuality? Leslie, you want to? Oh, Conrad has his hand
I
up.
want to jump there because and I'm going to speak for my generation. There was a saying that who started off on the top would end up on the bottom, and who started off on the bottom would end up on the top. I think there is a fluidity of sexuality and how we see ourselves that was not as easily recognizable when I was younger, because we were somehow forced to put ourselves into boxes. You have a big dick, so you must be a top, or you see yourself as people see you as feminine, and therefore you have to be a bottom. I think that those boxes really kind of made it difficult for someone like myself. When I came into my identity, I remember I was traveling in Holland and I met this man who told me, "You, sir, you are Lobo." And as a Trinidadian, I was like, "What you talking about? You're trying to cuss me or something?" And he explained to me that for them, Lobo means your sexual identity is defined by the identity of your partner, which is to say that if your partner is masculine, you take on a form that is feminine. And if your partner is feminine, you take on a role that is masculine. That as a person, you were able to shift and move back and forth as you saw fit. And in the time when I was growing up, that was not a very, very clear thing. It's so much more liberating in today's society, where persons can see themselves across an entire spectrum of sexuality and expression and gender and everything. And so I think it's beautiful now that liberation has taken place and exploded in such a way that we can have conversations about trans experience rather than just about a person being transgender or trans something else. I think it's beautiful that we now have expressions such as a sog bottom or things that shows the scope, the height and width and breadth of how we can express ourselves within the LGBTQI community. And I think that is a beautiful thing. As for what I am, so I know that I started off as a very, very aggressive top, which is evident by the porn that I did when I was younger. But again, I think there's that fluidity. The more you know, the more you push yourself to learn more. And I think sexually, that's what we're all kind of doing. Let me close with this. In the very beginning, as a gay man, when you first held a man's hand, that was exciting. And then when you first kissed a man, that was exciting. When you first topped a person, and so you keep pushing and pushing barriers. So for me, I'm still pushing barriers. I'm still learning about myself sexually and about my identity. And I think it never truly stops because we're always growing and we're never really at one fixed place. We're all on a journey to find out what we like best. And every time we find out we like this, something else usually comes along that's like, that's interesting also. So that was me. Got it. I'm mash up the place. Go ahead now. That's what I've been before. Sorry, go ahead. There's always silence after I speak. It's very scary.
So I'd like to respond, Conrad, thanks for sharing. It's so different how men come out versus how women come out. And coming out in Toronto back in the 70s, so I live in Toronto, and it's still pretty white. It was all white back then when I came out. And I was told I had a choice. I could be butch, femme, or a separatist. And back then I thought a separatist was somebody from Quebec, because I had no clue what a separatist was. Turns out a separatist is a woman who separates herself from men. So it was a huge struggle for me not seeing anybody who looked like me back in 1976 trying to come out in Toronto. So I made a concerted effort to start working at a place called the Lesbian Organization of Toronto to help other young women of color who looked like, me, so we could have some sort of support for each other. As Conrad was saying, the older you get, the more you learn, the more you change, and things have changed for me. I'd like to introduce you to Robin. When I say I'm differently abled, I use a mobility device. And when you get older and you start using a mobility device, everything changes in terms of how you are viewed by your queer communities. Because when you are straight or when you're queer, once you hit 50, you're no longer seen as a sexual being. So that's another struggle as you get older, is dealing with ageism and ableism and still trying to be true to yourself. So I came out as a dyke, which was also a struggle because that was a negative term back then. I've since reclaimed the word. And the reason why I identify as a dyke is because it's a political statement for me. And I came out at the age of 22, but prior to that, I was in a relationship, a very clandestine relationship with another young woman from Trinidad who was very Catholic and thought that us having orgasms and enjoying each other was such a sin that she felt guilty all the time. I won't mention names because Trinidad is still very small. And yes, but after we were found out by her family and she was sent back to Trinidad from Toronto, and my heart was broken. And at that point, I had to decide whether I was going to be me or whether I was going to continue hiding. And I decided this is who I am, and I've been out ever since. And it's so much easier for me being out because I don't have to live with a lot of stress. And now that I'm at the age of 66, nobody pays my rent, nobody pays a salary to me. I can do whatever the hell I want, as long as I am respectful and I do it with integrity.
Awesome. I absolutely love that. And if I may say, the age that you came out a year after in terms of age differences. I came out when I was 21. So you came out at my current age right now. So
you just came out.
Yeah, to my parents, yes.
Ah, you're a baby dyke. I don't know how you identify.
Well, I'm I identify as gender fluid, so I identify as a gender fluid lesbian.
Mm.
Um,
So yeah, Faye, you go ahead.
Amanda, do you agree that it's easier for men than women to come out? And
Um,
or what was it like for
I
you?
wouldn't say that it's easier for men than women. I think it's easier for people who are privileged to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my experience, I mean, clearly I'm not a man. I mean, I'm just letting you know. But I never had the problem of having to come out or declare sexuality. And that I I think is largely because of just hetero privilege of being presented in a way that was always well received by persons. When I say well received, I mean in terms of sexuality. So there was always that heterosexual cisgender privilege, even though I openly identified as queer and even though I openly dated women. And also I think being so femme presented also played into the fetishization of lesbian culture. And of course that was not my intention, but I recognize that that was part of why I didn't have difficulty in openly expressing my sexuality. And this was all through my 20s and all through my 30s. And yeah, so I hope that answers your question. To just go back a little bit, um, I have always understood myself to be queer. I didn't have the words to describe it, of course, as a child, but even back then, I was very interested in. I was very interested in people my age who were the same physical type as me. And then in my teenage years, not necessarily due to anything that I was taught, I had a lot of repression. And even within that repression, there was still desire. So there was no experimentation sexually, but there was still always a desire towards other girls and towards women. And I had a really tricky period, tricky but very revolutionary and revelationary to me when at 19 years old I lived with a woman who was much older than I was at the time. Non-sexual relationship, it never became sexual, but we lived together for a long period of time. And during that time I really had a chance to just observe myself. And there was really just an innocence about it. And I still treasure that time. I mean, problematic in many ways as well, but I still treasure that time in that it gave me an opportunity to just observe myself and to clarify any gray areas I may still have had. So I came into my 20s understanding certain things about myself, and yet with that understanding, I still did not, I didn't have the words, I didn't, I still didn't use words like queer or lesbian or gender fluid. And I mean, give thanks to the people who did that work in terms of giving language to the lived experiences of queer people, so that now we have these words and we could, you know, with reflection now say, well, this is what was happening at that time for me. Nevertheless, in my 20s, for most of my 20s, I was in one relationship with a man that became a marriage. And by the time I entered my 30s, we divorced. And that prompted a period in which I almost exclusively dated women. And presently I'm involved, not with a woman, with a man, and my identification is queer. So that's it.
Wayde, I'm going to add a little bit more on for you to answer. So, so apart from that first question,
Yes.
I'm going to add on to it also. Are you open about your sexuality, gender identity, and how old were you when you came out? So apart from the first part, you know, you can add to it.
Okay. So I identify as gay queer, I suppose, because I see queer differently. And in terms of my gender identity, thanks to how we've dichotomized things over the years, now I understand that what best describes me is gender nonconforming. And I just want to say, before I go to the other things about coming out, coming out is a very complex thing, and I don't think, quite frankly, privilege helps you. And I'll explain that in a little bit. I think there are a number of environmental variables that affect how each individual comes out. And privilege certainly does not help you if you belong to a patriarchal, homophobic family, or you're locked into a community, a religious community that's going to hold you back, or that hovers over you and uses any sort of force over you and over the decisions that you make. So it's not easy to say that privilege or lack thereof helps or does not help you to come out. I came out, well, I didn't come out because I was wearing nail polish a long time. So I didn't even know when I was out. I just knew when I was a child, I walked into my mother's bedroom one day, see lipstick, see nail polish, see eyeliner, and start to put on. And then my mother encouraged it a little bit. But then when you become a teenager, heterosexual parents want you to take up the identity as a boy or a girl. Clearly, they wanted me to be the boy. But I still had an affinity for these things, so I loved them. So when she wasn't home, I said, go and put on all. Sometimes at the same time. I wish I had like 4 hands, I could have put on all the nail polish, you know, and paint my face up, down, right side up. So my coming out was not a very nice experience, but I made the best out of it. One of my aunts outed me. She made up a story, which was not true. And then I decided to just confirm the fact that, yes, I was sleeping with men, having sex with men. And it was not received well, as you can imagine, because I grew up in Central. But it was what it was, and I survived. I stood my ground. I always learned to believe in myself. There's a very long journey to do that. And I've seen, though, and lived in a community where there are people of privilege who continue to live in the closet because they will be disowned, because parents will put you out. And I have actually heard stories of people in my community whose parents and whose relatives have shipped them away to another country because they've decided to come out. And some people even threaten to kill their own children. And the unfortunate reality is, in my neighborhood, parents forced one of their sons to drink poison because he came out.
Oh.
So, you know, these things, these are the realities. And I really wish that we wouldn't simplify things sometimes, especially when it comes to things like coming out. These, it's very, very sensitive to each person. And as I said, the variables, the environmental variables, different to each person where we live. It doesn't have to be this. The two people on the same street living next to each other can have very, very different variables that impact on how they come out and if they can come out at all. So that's that. And Faye, what was the fourth question that you asked me? Sorry.
I myself has forgotten. Your stories are so your stories are just pulling me in.
So you asked me, right? So I spoke about what age
I think you covered it all.
I did, right? Wonderful.
Yeah.
There you go.
Gabby, you've heard the other panelists. What was yours like? What was your story?
Oh, you heard me, right? I unmuted. Okay, good.
Yeah, you're on.
Wow. So my coming out story, I never really thought I had a coming out story because it was more like a outing story. I think, and my outing really happened in a tabloid, a local, a local tabloid in country where somebody wrote a very suggestive article, maliciously so, about myself. That was clearly about myself and this person that I was seeing. It was the TNT Mirror, I think. I've been trying to go through the archives to see if I find the article, but I can't find it. I find the article. But the headline was "Lesbian Lover Lures Her Student." That was my, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was kind of, that was, and my mother actually was at church 6 o'clock in the morning, came home with the newspaper in hand and said, handed it to me and was like, you know about this? And I'm like, jaw dropping, what the hell is happening? I'm in a small town, grew up in Central as well as like you, Wayde. And of course I can't hide. And I was never, you know, a closet case. I was kind of always very obvious. So, I mean, the whole village, the whole community, the whole everybody kind of, you know, that was it. I mean, that was confirmation, tabloid or not. So I didn't really have a chance to say, come out. And after that, it was just a matter of, okay, well, what do I do now? Do I hide? Or do I just say, well, you know what, it's out. If I hide, then it looks like I have something to hide. So I decided that I would just walk the street as boldly and as bravely as I could. And you know, whoever wanted to approach or say or snicker or whisper, you know, well, you know what, that's their choice. I've never really considered myself being in a closet or, you know, having to just pretend to not be. I identify as gay. I think I've come to that as an adult, you know, later on in my life. I think in my 30s, even in my early 40s now, I've always had, no offense to anyone, I've always had a challenge with the word lesbian, and maybe it's because it's, you know, it's just, you know, the whole system of labels and what labels resonate with you and what labels don't. I think that the lesbian connotation was always a negative one. I went to an all-girls school and the lesbian word was always a bad word. So I think somehow that sat with me as a bad thing. And of course I know it's not a bad thing now, but also because I've just, you know, I've also, I feel that the word gay just kind of blankets, is my kind of blanket statement for who I am. And that's what I identify as. I've gone through periods of very butch throughout my life. And, you know, it's, you know, as Conrad put it earlier, it is a very, very, very fluid thing. You know, when you think you've discovered all there is to know, you know, you think you reach the age of 40, which I couldn't wait to reach because nobody could tell me nothing after I reached 40. So, you know, but even in my 40s, I am discovering new things about myself, new things that I like, new things that I, you know, didn't like, things that I had put in a closet about myself, things that I'm deciding now I'm going to pull out and rediscover. And it's been a really interesting journey and exciting journey, and I'm happy and excited to see where I end up, you know. So that's kind of me.
Wow.
Faye, if you're talking, you're muted still, darling.
Okay, so muted.
My bad. The questions from the audience that says or ask, what was homophobia like in the era you came out? And has homophobia evolved in the Caribbean That is, has it repackaged itself and presented differently? And finally, what are the lessons learned about dealing with homophobia at its multiple levels? So I guess I'm not sure what they mean by multiple levels, but I know a lot of young folks who are on this call with us today. And one of the questions coming from the young people was, how has your relationship with your family been affected since you came out? And is it the same now? Which would form part of that, I believe.
Can I do a little bit
first?
Can I do a little bit of jumping in again?
Of course, you first.
I want to approach this in kind of two ways. And I want to touch on a number of different things that were said before. I think the way that a person accepts their sexuality or their identity throws a huge monkey wrench into how people respond to them. Let me say it that way.
Question. Do you mean accept or come to the realization of their orientation?
I think it's a little bit of both, because I think if you actually accept who you are, then you're unafraid to speak about it or identify by whatever label you choose for yourself.
Okay.
I don't remember experiencing homophobia throughout my childhood into my adulthood when I lived abroad. I only started to experience homophobia when I came back to Trinidad about 6 to 10 years ago. I was out from the time I knew what I liked. And that was presentation college, like Form 2. I remember having a little lime home by me and bringing people over and saying, well, everybody have girlfriends, and I have a girlfriend, but I have a boyfriend too. And if you don't like it, rock it. And so because of that kind of being so adamant, I walked a road where everyone knew I was, and nobody kind of made me feel badly for it. You know, I'm so much so in presentation college, I remember lunchtime, you know, guys would pretend to be my boyfriend and thing and fight over, what are you doing sitting down next to Conrad? That's my man, and that kind of nonsense. I am still at a place with all of the guys from my year, and literally we run the country. But I'm still in a place with these guys where when we got together for our 50th anniversary, everyone came with their girlfriends or wives or whatever it was, or outside women at the time, and I came with my partner, and no one questioned him. And he was accepted into the fold. And people sat down with him, and people was like, so Conrad, why you never try anything behind me? I wasn't a type or what? You know, that kind of thing. And so, in many ways, I answered the questions that they were willing to ask because I showed I was unafraid to answer.
And someone mute K-Star, please. K-Star, thank you.
Yeah, I showed I was unafraid to answer them. And I think in response to what Amanda says about privilege, I think there is a certain amount of privilege that comes into play. Because if you stand up and say you're willing to answer questions, then people will ask them of you. I think if you hide and show that you're weak and afraid, then people will respond to you with a show of strength to challenge who you are. At a very, very young age, I remember someone saying or calling me a buller man. And I had a hot mouth, and my response was, yes, I like to bull men, not little fucking boys like you, so rock to the left. And I think it's about, I'm sorry for the language, I think it's about the adamancy of that really, if you stand up and you say, this is who I am and I am proud of it and I don't care what you think, then people kind of go, yeah, I dig that, I understand that. I think homophobia has changed, especially in Trinidad, because we were a country where people thought things and maybe whispered things, but nothing was ever said or acted upon. And I think that seems to have changed in that now persons feel that they have a right to be they have a right to their opinion, and that opinion allows them to force it upon others. It's Gabrielle, I see you shaking your head. You understand? You kind of agree with me? Because long ago, like, things were whispered. Like, even that article that might have come out for you in the newspaper would not have named the name.
No,
It
not at all.
suggested that so-and-so did XYZ with XYZ, and no one would say out loud and brave.
No.
But now, like, I remember when I first came back, I was living in a different area, in a particular village. And I would walk in, and everybody in the village knew I was gay. But all of a sudden, people were like saying things and saying it loud and coming out in the street and drinking a beer and saying, yeah, this is where the Bullabans live and all this kind of stuff. And I was shocked. This was not something that I grew up with. You know what I mean? I will say this, it seemed as if the only persons who suffered from homophobia when I was growing up were persons of trans experience, or persons who we would have then identified with as drag queens. And that would have been because the juxtaposition of a man wanting to dress as a woman was so far-fetched for persons that they felt they had to say something. They had to voice what they felt. I feel as if now, you know, persons standing up and saying that I love what I love puts such a scare into people now that they feel as if they have to comment because of their religion or because of where they live, or they want to protect their own children. And all of a sudden what we do in a bedroom or who we choose to love seems to have such a strong effect on others. Like, I don't understand why that is. Before I close there, I just want to say one other thing to touch on what Leslie said earlier. There was a time when, not a time, when I lived in London, as you got older as a gay person, we referred to the change that happens as gray invisibility. And that you got to a certain age, and it wasn't just that people stopped seeing you as sexual, they just plain stopped seeing you. So no, you were no longer exciting in the club. You know, people walked by you as if it was like, what is old man doing here? We've even talked about that here in Trinidad. I remember talking about, you know, those guys you would see at the club every Saturday sitting on the same stool, and they'd be like, oh God, why does old man don't go home? What are you doing here? This is for young people. But even that is changing as well, because now we have silver daddies, and you know, we have MILFs and DILFs. And so there's so much about how we can accept and proclaim and feel proud about how we are, whatever our age, within our sexuality. And I think that is a beautiful thing. I think in just the end, I think internalized homophobia is really just that if you can overcome whatever's inside, you can educate and be a beacon for so many. And so that's where I would like to kind of end it. Thanks.
I was about to call Gabby, but she has disappeared. Just one before I move on, maybe Amanda, you can, oh, Gabby is back. Since Conrad called on you, I would ask you to comment, but before I do so, I just want to pay Conrad this comment from Rhoma. She says, you are so right, Conrad. This homophobic shift came through the Jamaican music that was now rampant in our society. So yes, Gabby, what do you think? He called on you? Put you on the spot.
And no, I mean, I was shaking my head to several things Conrad was saying. And very much so my experience in terms of, you know, I always felt, you know, monkey doesn't know which tree to climb.
That is so true.
You know, and so, I mean, I came out at, well, I was outed, let me say, at 18. And then I just decided, well, all right, I'm out, so I might as well be out. And if anybody dared to step to me, well, you know, come through. And it never really happened. I mean, I was in Trinidad. I left Trinidad when I was about 23, and I went to school in the States, and I was out there as much as I could be out. And of course took full advantage of the fact that there were places that I could go, and people that I could talk to, and information that I could get, and girlfriends that I could date, and that was all good. And there was no way when I came back to Trinidad that I was going to stop being who I was. And yeah, I mean, just like Conrad said, it's only when I came back to Trinidad that, suddenly the homophobic people had this voice that suddenly felt that they had a right to, my most common comment walking down the street would be, there's a man or woman. And that's what I would get constantly. And that was my experience of homophobia, to the point where when I would leave my office during lunchtime, which is usually when I left my office, so if I had to walk to another building, I would kind of firm up and get ready to brace myself for the comments that would come if there's some construction worker somewhere, or somebody walking. And what was scarier actually to me was children going to secondary school. They are bold and brazen, and they will call you all kind of things to your face. And there were moments when I would see teenagers come in, and I would be like, okay, let me see which one of them is going to say something, or which one is going to snicker, or which one is going to, point and say, and that was again, it didn't make me, feel like I had to hide. I still was who I was. And I always felt like, well, you have the problem, not me. I am not going to let you define or make me feel afraid to be who I was. But absolutely, I think that they push those that, and I understand. I am not saying this to say that that there is not genuine reason for some to be really afraid when they walk out the street, when they are in their workplace, when they're in the supermarket, when they are wherever. There are genuine concerns for fear. But I cannot myself say that I have been so approached or experienced with homophobic persons. It just, I haven't had that real experience of homophobia. And I think that does come in part, because I am who I am, take it or leave it, so that's my experience.
Yes,
I just
I
wanted
agree. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay. I just wanted to talk quickly to go back to about coming out. Coming out is a North American concept, because when you're a person of color, you don't run around saying, hey, guess what, I'm queer, because you could end up dead. So living here in North America and doing the kind of work that I do, I have to keep telling people it's not that simple to come out. So I just wanted to mention that in terms of homophobia, I'm experiencing lesbophobia, transphobia, and homophobia. The last 3 times I was in Trinidad, I was called Zammy, and it was a man, I don't know if it's the same man, but he must have brothers all wanting to show me that all you need is a good man. In 2012, I was using a cane, and in 2018, I was using a cane. And still, they want to show me all I need is a good man. And what I do is I call them out. And I say to them, how would you like it if somebody was saying that to your mother or your sister or your auntie? And they apologize. But if you don't take them on, and the only reason I took them on is because we were out in a public space. If it's a one-on-one thing, I'm not doing that, because I have to be careful. I have to pick my battles. The other thing that I'm finding that's happening to me is that I'm being read as trans. So something as simple as going into a women's washroom is so fearful for me right now. I've been physically assaulted 4 times here in North America, in the States, and here in Canada, just trying to go to pee. And these are women, white women, policing the bathrooms and assaulting me. So you can imagine, I can only begin to imagine based on my experience, what's happening to my trans women friends who are older. And Conrad, I want to get back to you when you're talking about aging and silver daddies. There's a difference. There's a huge difference when men age, regardless of their color, and how they're still perceived as sexual beings, versus when women age and how we are not perceived as sexual beings. All of my older gay male friends have a very active sex life, and they have lots of young men after them. Friends who are my age, when we dare to go out dancing, people look at us like, what are they? Same thing you said about that old man sitting in the corner of the bar. That's how we are looked at now by young queer women when we go out to women's dances here in Toronto. It's like, what are you doing here? And that's the work I'm doing now, is educating young queer women that one day, if you are lucky, you will be a queer senior. And is that how you want to be treated? So like, smarten up and show some kindness. That's all you need, is some kindness in the world for things to be better for everybody. Yeah. And I just want to do a shout out to my friend Anthony Mohammed, who is there on the screen. Hi, Anthony. Yep. So again, it's hard for both genders, but it's easier for the male gender in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Before we go to Amanda, there are some comments in the chat. Gabrielle, I think this was to you when you were talking about your experiences just now. Shahan said that he can definitely agree to what you were saying in terms of when you were walking in the road and such, because he said, I will walk the road and people will shout that's a man or a woman or look a hen. Now, Shahan, he's one of our drag queens in our community. So that's just a little insight on the comments. Also, he said I will normally answer bold either of the following. I can be whatever you want me to be, or come back and check and see if you like what you find. So that is what Shahan commented and said. There's also a question in the chat, but it's directed at the entire panel. So I will ask that question after Amanda's contribution. So Amanda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to what Gabrielle was saying, with something I've never said to her before, and that is, one of the treasured experiences I had as a teenager was knowing Gabrielle. We went to the same school. And even though we were not friends back then, everything that Gabrielle is saying here about how she has always perceived herself and expressed herself, completely true. And that is the way in which I perceived her as well. And I mean, it was just amazing at that time for me, being femme presented, not open, to see someone else who was in my age group, who was so comfortably different. And I say different because, you know, back then I didn't have a phrase like sexually fluid or gender fluid or anything like that. And
it froze.
Yeah.
Oh, we seem to have lost Amanda.
Mandy froze.
Wayde, would you like to come in here? Oh, she dropped altogether.
Well, I didn't have the pleasant experience that the rest of people had. I was bullied. People pelted me with stone, gravel. Short little twinkie, femme presenting Indian boy walking down the street. So they called me Bulla, they called me Hen. I've had experience. I was bullied at school, on the street. Women laughed at me. I was in an airport in the United States, and a young Latina girl and her family started laughing at me because I was living my true self. I was minding my own business, walking down the street in Port of Spain, going to work. A Rasta man followed me and threatened to kill me in front of everybody, and people laughed at me, and I had to run from my life because if I challenged, I was going to get mob assaulted. So it wasn't a pleasant experience, and this went from my teenage years all the way up to my adulthood. Sometimes it's, I did try to stand up for myself, and, you know, just like everybody else say yes. So yes, I fuck with men. If you have a problem with it, then that's you, but I enjoy it. But sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't work. And, but I managed to find spaces. For me, I was fortunate to find friends and bigger, scarier looking friends to hang out with. So when anybody called me Balaman, before I could even say something, they'd be like, yes. And I'm the boyfriend.
You don't know. You don't know.
Micah.
So, but the homophobia has not changed as far as I'm concerned. In the 1980s in Trinidad and Tobago, homophobia started spreading with the growth, the rapid expansion of the Pentecostal church movement. A lot of American Pentecostals came to Trinidad and Tobago and started preaching on TV and going in communities and setting up these churches and talking about homosexuals, and it's an evil plague affecting the land. And I was told that I had a demon, and I was like, okay, bring it on. I was waiting for them to actually exercise me. I was going to give them the show. I promised. I said, made up my mind. I said, the day anybody in the church that I used to go to was going to call me to exercise, they was getting the exorcist experience, everything. I didn't give out the force myself to make it happen. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's for me, it was very difficult trying to navigate my path, but I knew I had to live my true self, and I refused to let people tell me that I wasn't good enough. Sometimes I took a risk. I went walking on the street, and I knew that they would call me names, but after a while I said, let's grow thick skin and fuck them. Because I am living in my space, and I am in my part of the universe, and I don't need them to validate me. And if anyone is being harassed or bullied, you don't need nobody to validate you. You validate your own damn self.
Great. Amanda, now that we have you back because we lost you there for a while, can you continue with where you were?
What was the last thing you heard, Faye?
We heard you were describing how Gabby was the same as what she said in school.
Yes.
That's where we lost you.
Right. This is the thing, and Gabrielle and I, like I said, we were not friends. I don't think we ever spoke to each other at all in secondary school. There was this one day, she came into our classroom and she was mixing paints to make gold, and she was on the ground mixing like red. I remember just taking in this person, and you know, and just noticing her strangeness, which I can now call gender fluidity, and feeling so welcome by that. And so everything that she's saying here about expression and how she perceived herself and how others perceived her, I could see just how much that meant to me and how important it is in terms of how we reach out to other generations and in terms of how we reach out to each other. In terms of the question of
oh dear, we've lost her again.
Right, I think I grew up in a really homophobic family, but never did I feel that projected towards me. I think it would have been very difficult for one of my male cousins to have been open about any sexual identification that wasn't heterosexual. And I think also if I were to have presented as a dyke or anything that wasn't femme, I think that would have been rejected as well. And I know this because of the way in which my family would talk about anything that they considered quote unquote deviant. But they also spoke very openly about me and spoke very openly about my sexuality. My cousins would openly tease me about it, but it would be very it'd be like humor and very playful, never estranging. And of course, this took place within a wider social context, as we know, of growing up and listening to music or seeing things on television that were clearly homophobic as well. Nowadays, I think, yes, there's a repackaging of homophobia. In many ways, persons, from what we see on social media, appear to be very open and liberal, but I also note that these things happen within spaces that are very urban. So around the time of the Jones judgment, for example, the two protest demonstrations that took place in town, one in front of the parliament and another in front of the Hall of Justice, one of the things I noted at that time was not just the location, obviously, in town, but also the people all seem to be from town as well. And Sharon Martin made a great point about the people who have the privilege of being invisible. So we live in a time in which vulnerable communities, the LGBTI community as a vulnerable community, is more open in terms of visibility, more open in terms of meaningful inclusion, but homophobia is still very present, and we see that in terms of the amount of people who immediately after the judgment were put out of homes, the amount of people who spoke about receiving discrimination in their workplace, the slew of hateful comments that we saw on a daily basis online. Jason Jones himself speaking about the number of death threats he received at that time and even received for years afterwards. So I agree that indeed, even though we live in much easier times than 20, 30 years ago, it's really a repackaging of homophobia.
Great, thank you. Before we go on, let me just read a couple comments here. This one, Gabby, is for you. Shalini S. says, Gabby, the moment I realized I was different is when your mom pulled me into her office and said that my best friend's parents said they didn't want me to be associated with her. Must admit, that was a rude awakening for me back then.
It is. Faye, if I may interject, there is a question that's higher up that I was waiting for everybody to finish.
Which one? The one
sharing.
about homophobia and transphobia is different culturally?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought we covered it, but I'll read it to the panel. It says to the panel, can you comment on situations when everyone knew you or another person was LGBTQI and it was not a problem? I asked because when I was young in Penal, there was what I now know as a trans woman dressed in a sari who joined all the other women to make food. She was well known and widely accepted. I wonder if homo and transphobia is different culturally than other places. Anybody? Did we lose Conrad? Oh, there he is, right.
I think transgender people, they face different ranges of discrimination. So transphobia is even within our community. There are members of our community who do not want to be around transgender persons. Especially there are a lot of cisgender men who take umbrage to being around anyone who presents effeminate and transgender women. Definitely a problem for a lot of them. And I think about why we are different as individuals. And trans people also face bureaucratically a lot of challenges too as well. For a trans person to go into a health center to get medical care becomes an issue. For a trans person to even get a passport is an issue. And for those of us who, for me being gay, I don't have a problem getting a passport. I mean, they might ask me questions and whatever, but if somebody asks me about my nail polish, I can say, well, it have nothing to do with me getting my passport, give me my damn passport. But for trans people, it's quite different. But I know then again in the East Indian culture in my village where I grew up, there were trans entertainers. They were accepted into communities because they provided a very specific role. So that was sitting up in a wedding or the christening of a baby, and dance perform. And that was acceptable. So people would turn out in large numbers to see these women perform. But if they're presented as women outside of that space or that environment, then it became a problem. The very same people who would cheer them on would then become some of their most severe critics. So I suppose there is this sort of acceptance, and it depends on the communities. I have heard as well of older East Indian women who have the feminine grandchild or see that their grandson is actually their granddaughter. And then they groom that child in that role, and the family adopts that and accepts the child like that. So I don't know, I suppose as I was saying earlier, you know, there are so many variables and dynamics in everyone's environment. But, you know, if we're speaking generally, trans people, I think, have a much more difficult experience in Trinidad and Tobago.
True. I agree with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Conrad.
Anyone
I
else?
think there's also a certain amount of privilege that persons who can pass take for granted. I think because I was always so outspoken, I just assumed in many ways that if you fight that good fight, you know. But I think one of the earliest kind of shocks or moments of realization I had was for work traveling back from Jamaica to Trinidad with a person of trans experience. And this was for work, so we were doing the whole 9 yards, you know, and we were going through, you know, like all of I'm losing my words. But in moving from place to place, I recognized and saw people looking at us and focusing on the person I was traveling with and staring and making us or trying to make us feel uncomfortable. And especially when we landed in Trinidad and I was with her and I could see persons down at the end, the persons who would be handling baggage and all of that, making comments and snickering. And I remember going up to a person from Customs and Excise and saying, listen, if this was in another country, they could be fired for that. Why are you not commenting about that and stopping it? And it was really only then that I recognized that it's more than just being willing to stand up for yourself, because there's a certain amount of privilege that comes with being able to pass or being able to blend in with whatever the heteronormative ideal for what man is or female is. And so it really is a greater struggle for persons of trans experience, because as mentioned before, there's a kind of jarring that takes place almost in the minds of some homophobic cisgendered people, where they can't wrap their heads around why a person would want to be so fabulous and want to be so comfortable in their fabulousness and almost resent people for being so beautiful and so wonderful and so unique and so more. And for some of us who follow that heteronormative ideal, you know, we kind of bluster through, not recognizing sometimes the privilege that we have to being able to navigate spaces without as much trouble as some of our other LGBTQI brothers and sisters. Yeah.
So we have a few comments on our Facebook Live. A few of them refer to the church and the church's influence and how it has caused the homophobic narrative at home. And importantly, the hypocrisy of these churches and their missionaries. And one person in specific is saying the church has caused so much trauma in my life and in the lives of so many others. There's also a comment that the homophobia is not just only on a physical level, but on a emotional and mental level. Any additional comments the panel would like to make with that?
Well, I grew up in a Pentecostal church, Bible belter, homo hater, demon possessed Balaman. And it's true, as I was saying earlier, in the 1980s, there was just very rapid spread of the Pentecostal movement. And I feel, you know, it was an easy entry point for them. Pick the most vulnerable group of people and say they're possessed with the devil. And then jump on to the Hindus after and say they worship idols. And then jump onto the Catholics and say they also worship idols, because it's about spreading power and looking for money. And I think if you are struggling with your religion, and if your religion makes you feel uncomfortable, leave the fucking thing. You ain't got dead. God still love you. And don't let anyone tell you that you have to hold on to your religion if your religion is putting you up against the wall. Your religion is supposed to teach you love and hope and tell you that in the end, everything and everyone will reach the same place and the same destiny once they live as good human beings. And if your religion is teaching you differently, there are other options. There are other Pentecostal churches that now accept us, or maybe find a gentler religion that welcomes you and teaches you love and acceptance. And otherwise, just do like me, be agnostic and say nail polish is the best damn thing.
So here's a question from one of the young folks. Many of you are activists, or at least advocated for LGBTQI plus advancement at some point. My question is, what lessons do you hope transfer over from the activism of your generation to the activism of the current generation? Or to put it differently, what would you like the current generation to remember or to keep in mind in fighting the fight you once fought? Anybody? Leslie. Unmute. Unmute. Can somebody unmute her? There you go. Go ahead.
Mute. So I've had the privilege of attending the G.A.P conference, Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equity. And what Conrad was pointing out about transgender women in particular having problems crossing borders. So to keep that in mind, what trans women have to go through on a daily basis, almost hourly, and their lives are always on the line, especially trans women of color. And if you're older and you're a transgender woman and you do not purse, it is even more difficult to live a regular kind of life because you're constantly in fear. Now, what would I like the younger generation to learn? What I found out from attending the G.A.P conference was that younger queer activists forget that we exist. They seem to think that they came into being activists on their own without even taking into account that others came before them. So my challenge when I presented at both conferences was to go out and find us. Find your queer seniors, find your queer elders, find your transgender women have been around for centuries all over the world. And what Wayde was just saying about the East Indian women, trans women who would come out and perform and who were at weddings and people accepted them. They have been around for a long time. And what I said earlier is that a lot of activists, and I seem to find this more with young women activists rather than young men activists, they forget that they're going to get older. And you have to start thinking now about what kind of life do you want to be leading? What quality of life do you want to be leading as you get older? And it is so important for queer youth and queer seniors to work together, to support each other and to learn from each other and to be kind to each other. So when you come up against homophobia and transphobia and lesbophobia and all the pain that's out there, especially now with COVID and the amount of anxiety and depression that we're going through because we are so cut off from having any real connections with each other, and especially for queer youth, not having support or safe places to be their true selves. We have seniors dying here in Canada because of COVID. And I've been advocating for the queer seniors who have died alone and invisibly. So we have to start from this place. That's why I really welcome the fact that you asked me to do this, Faye, that we need to support each other immediately and move forward doing that. And kudos to our young queer facilitator from UE. You know, I hope you can spread the
Shahan.
word and to all the queer youth who are listening to please try and work together and to support each other so we can all lead better and richer lives.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
I will pass on that. Conrad,
Amanda?
well, actually, I saw
Oh,
Conrad stand up.
Okay. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Conrad.
Okay. So two things I think I would like to say. The first is this is an amazing panel, and thank you all. I want to echo what Giselle said. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be a part of it. There needs to be more of this. It can't be that the community is just about parties or advocacy. It can't just be about fun or serious work. There must be some kind of middle ground that allows for education as well. And I think it's really important for us as a community to know our own local history. I mean, so much of what the stories of struggle that are always kind of celebrated are the stories of Stonewall and that kind of stuff, and that there are stories here in Trinidad that we need to know and pass on, and we need to be able to talk about Paula and what she did, and so many of the older heads that are not here anymore. And so I would say that in the struggle for a new tomorrow, let us not forget the struggle that took place yesterday. And one of the ways of doing that is giving the voice of the senior queer community a real voice and an opportunity to share those stories in a way that they can be documented, saved, and then passed on, so that we recognize not just about where we want to go as followed by what we see on television, but have a real understanding and idea of where we've been and what it was like and who danced bottle for who. You know, that kind of thing. That's really, really important as well. So that's what I would like to pass on to the new generation.
Thank you. Amanda?
This is a really good question. Today, contemporaries, Gen Z contemporaries, we are millennials and now Gen Z contemporaries. I think that the amount of visibility is one of the things I'm really proud about in terms of that bridge between the two generations. And it is something that I could have seen change as I grew older When I was very small, it was almost unheard of that a queer person would just proudly walk down the street with a trans person. And that was always very confusing because, I mean, with Trinidad and Tobago's carnival culture and transvestism always being part of Trinidad and Tobago's carnival culture, there was not growing up so much public representation of queer culture, of expressed queer sexualities. And in the last 5 to 10 years, it was so beautiful for me to see in Trinidad and Tobago how much more visible queer culture became. And I'm really proud of that, and I'm glad to have been a part of that ethos, and it's one of the things I'm really happy to have shared with the Gen Z.
Shahan, go ahead.
Okay, guys, so we have a couple comments. Earl said, yes, the stories about pride are often us-centric. We cannot forget our history, our experiences, and our stories. We have a question from Marcus. From your experiences with your own families on our programmatic level, what do you see as important elements or needs for families and on managing queer family issues and queer related emotions, etc.? In other words, what interventions, skills, and/or conversations would have eased your coming out experiences? Anyone want to have a whack at that?
Ban the church, first of all. Shut the Protestants up. Oh my God, the full parents' head with shit. Plenty shit. The first thing you tell parents is your children possessed with a demon, and read some scripture verse and it's going to help you. I think there are quite a bit of contemporary media around now that can help parents if they really want to understand their children. Just look at television, look at Modern Family. Although it's very white and it doesn't really translate into colored families, it's an entry point, and we have to start somewhere. And children can, I mean, if you think that your parents might be open to that idea, sort of expose them to gay media. Netflix and every single TV station in the world now is including one of the letters from the community or two of the letters from the community into their mainstreaming. So maybe that's an easy start. And very often we use this phrase, use the lowest hanging fruit. So maybe start like that. But I don't think that there's a panacea, and I don't think that there's a handbook that you can hand to parents to say this is how to deal with your child. Having a child is, I imagine, a very complex thing, and your expectations of your child is very different from your child's expectation of themselves. And your realization of your child is very different from your child's realization of their self. So what might be one good solution for a particular family in a particular space may not be the same solution for another family. So that's really complex. I don't know that we can find a solution very easily for that, but we can definitely, at the national level, encourage a wider sense of tolerance, encourage people to be nicer. So help, as a community, as Trinidad and Tobago, if we focus on love and care, I think that will go a long way into opening our minds.
Can I jump in there?
Go ahead. By all means.
No, to add to a little bit to what Wayde was saying there. I don't know, and forgive me if I have been under a rock, but if there are parent support groups locally. I'm not sure. I mean, correct me if there are, but just to say that I think if you're in a position to find a friend or parent of a friend who you can talk to, who might be, you know, more open or more willing to share your experience or share your story with. I have felt like in my experience, I mean, I can't say that my parents, or at least my mother, is 100% accepting and open. I mean, it's kind of like I've not hid. She knows. Both my parents know, and they will continue to be my parents no matter what. But I have found that as I've gotten older, there have been in my life and in my growing up, so many people that I've discovered who grew up with me, who are gay, who I say, but wait, your parents know you gay, and you all haven't had a conversation, and we grew up in the same neighborhood and we didn't know each other was. And I think parents have an easier time dealing when they know they have an ally, when they know they have somebody of their own generation that they could talk to, that, you know, and that really makes it easier to deal with. I mean, yes, I agree that there are so many programs on television, so many shows that you could watch, but the older generation not connecting with TV the way our generation might connect with television. So to find somebody in your own neighborhood who you could talk to, or somebody whose own child, you know, I mean, I just the other day I was talking to my mom about a trans person who I did not realize was trans, and I got his permission to share with my mom, and my mom was like, oh yeah, I knew. His mother told me that a long time ago. And I'm like, wait, you knew that all this time and you didn't say nothing to me, you didn't share that with me. And it's just that I think over the years of realizing that she wasn't the only one who had a gay child or a trans child.
Yeah.
You know, you could talk to other people and yet there's nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't do nothing wrong. This is not some punishment for being, you know, and I think that is really helpful, finding that support system among their own parents, you know?
Yes, Gabby, Silver Lining has a program with led by a psychologist for parents and their children. So if anybody on the call, on the watch, on the live is interested, they can probably reach out there. I think, Conrad, you had your hand up. You wanted to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to also say, for us to recognize that we can be heroes within the community as well. You know, we don't have to also just look to other persons to fill this void. We, in walking our walk and in walking our path, we are heroes that can help just by doing and being who we are. I had a very good friend of mine who, upon finding out that his daughter and son were both trans, came to me and said, so I want you to talk to my children. You know, I need to talk to Uncle Conrad because, well, he's the one. And it's, when he first came to me, I was like, I don't really want to do this thing, you know, I have children, and so, but we can be the ones. And it's just through being our authentic selves and listening to the questions and answering from a true space, and then connecting them with the stories we have of our own life and with the things that we know of. Because there was a mention of a number of different shows on the chat there, but we live in a gay community where we're surrounded by gay material, but a straight person with 2 kids isn't. So share that information with them because they don't know it, and you don't know what you don't know. So we need to be the ones to tell them to go look at Pose, and to tell them to sit with their kids and watch Council of Dads, because they don't have a clue, because they're not in our community. So we have an opportunity to bridge that gap and share the information about the Silver Lining Foundation, which I didn't know about and which others probably don't know about, and let's get that message moving around. We can't wait for the information to come to them. In some cases, we have to be that bridge to take it there.
For for the entire panel and for the entire audience out there, just to let you know that tomorrow night, our discussion is about family, parents and children, etc. So if you and your parent would like to come on, join us on the Zoom, register for it. Elders here would like to join, yes, and give your perspective as maybe a parent. And even if you're not a parent, I know that we have connected with younger ones in our community and around us over the years who have come like our children. So we do have a perspective on what we can share and what we think. And also, one of the, just now, Shahan, one moment. And also, PrideTT records everything here. It's a way of keeping our stories and having it there because it's Facebook Live, it's recorded, and you can always go back to it and play it. So yes, Shahan, sorry to cut you off there just now. I just wanted to get that out.
No problem, no problem. I had some questions sent to me privately. The person, they would like to remain anonymous. There's like, I think it's about 3 questions, so we could just go through those and then get back to the agenda. The first question is to the panelists: what advice would you give a younger LGBTQIA person who doesn't believe that they can ever be open with their gender identity or sexuality and is maybe contemplating sexuality?
And contemplating what, sorry?
And contemplating sexuality.
Oh, okay.
Anybody? Anyone?
Conrad, you're muted. Sorry.
I realized Gabrielle and Wayde want to have
I was laughing because I was seeing Gabby laughing to myself.
Okay.
You know, and I'm not laughing because it's at all funny. It's just, you know, it's really such a personal journey that I don't think
still learning about me.
I don't think you could tell anybody how. I think as you get older, or as you start to maybe, you know, get together with more like folks, that it becomes more comfortable being yourself. And you have to really come to that peace with yourself by, you know, on your own. No, I don't think any one of us can say, well, you know, this is the formula, this is the strategy, this is what I did. You know, you do these things and then everything will be fine. It doesn't quite work that way. So yeah, I mean, I was just laughing because I'm like, geez, that's a real hard question, boy. I don't know. I don't know how to answer.
I'm sure Amanda agrees with you. I mean, we all have come to who we are today differently, with different experiences. And even though we may not have had role models, and we may not have had the internet and stuff as there is now, it's just a journey you go on with yourself. But we do have to find support mechanisms. So and there are more systems right now and mechanisms that exist today than there were back then. But as I think a few of you have pointed out, it's about probably reaching out to somebody. I mean, there are NGOs now. There's people that you can touch. Conrad, you have your hand up, but I was calling on Amanda. I'll come back to you shortly.
Okay, yeah.
Just give me 1 second. There was a typo that was at the end of that question, and it was just corrected by the person. Instead of
sexuality,
instead of the last sexuality, it's supposed to be and is maybe contemplating suicide, not
that's
sexuality.
what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Trans coalition. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. That's why I asked. I really thought so.
I have been there. I've been to a very low point in my life and I contemplated suicide twice. I thought that I had built up the courage to do it once, and then, like a big coward, I just put the razor by my wrist and panic. I'm like, can't cut myself. But I would like to say to you, find your flock, We are all creatures here. And thanks to PrideTT, we are seeing each other. Find us. Let's find each other. Let's help find each other. Flap up your wings a little more often, especially if you know you're an out person who can save someone or help someone. You know, help these people find us. Let's be the noisy flock that people can help. That we can help people, those people who are going through that struggle or going through that decision. Let's help find them and let's let them know that there's a flock willing to adopt you and love you.
Couldn't say it better myself.
Hi, Keita.
I'd just like to say, in terms of that question, you really have to just know your situation, because every family is different, every environment is different. You have to kind of feel it out as you're going along and know when you are comfortable. I'd say it's really important to just find like one person who you could be open with, that you could trust. That one person can keep you grounded and help you feel much, much better. I know even that could be like a leap of faith. The person I came out to was highly religious, but she was my best friend of 2 years. And she's the person I felt most comfortable coming out to. And I just reached that point in our friendship where I felt comfortable with her and I trusted her. And it was a moment in my life where I felt really, really lonely. It might not have been to the point of suicide, but I felt really, really lonely and really, really depressed and didn't care about a lot. And when I told her, it wasn't okay immediately because she did have to question her beliefs, but she saw how genuine I was, and she came back the next day and she apologized to me if she hurt me in any way by whatever she said, and now we are still best friends. And I just want to say, if you could just find out one person who you can be open with, I think that you'll feel much better about life and it'll help you hold on. So yeah. You don't have to come out to your family if they don't accept that. One person who you could just let some stuff go with will be a great help.
Panelists, if I may be so bold, thank you, Keita, for your contribution, because I was honestly thinking the same thing, because I have been in a similar situation where I contemplated that, but it was not along the lines of my sexuality, but I have contemplated that. So, and what Keita is saying is so true, because that one person can honestly save your life, because I have had someone very close to me do that for me a couple months ago. To my amazing panelists, I know some of you may have to go to work in the morning, but if you could indulge me in like a half an hour more, please, that would be very much appreciated. Because I have two more questions from our anonymous source that I think would be helpful, and then we would ask you one more question, and then I want to ask Leslie about one of her programs that she is currently involved in. So if you could indulge me in like a half an hour more, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm at work
Just for you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so one of the last questions I'm going to ask you on behalf of our anonymous person is, can you share with us what it's like to beat the LGBTQIA during the AIDS crisis, and what advice does this generation needs to know about HIV?
Conrad?
Couple of things. So part of the work that I do right now is working in HIV, and I have an NGO called PAM, which is the Patient Advocate Mission, and we support persons who are living with HIV. The first thing to recognize is that don't believe what you're told. We still are in a crisis. It might not be an AIDS crisis, but we're still in a crisis with HIV because so many of our population, whether positive or not positive, are unaware of the progress and the strides that have been made in HIV, in accessing healthcare, in what healthcare is like for persons today, and in about how we can live full lives as persons who are HIV positive. I speak as an HIV positive person, and I've been HIV positive for more than 15 years now. So many people aren't aware that you can have children that don't necessarily have to be HIV positive. So many people are still unaware that you can be in what is called a discordant couple relationship, where one person is positive and the other person is negative, without any fear of that, of your status becoming the status of your partner. We are still in a place in Trinidad and Tobago where our government is not supportive of PrEP, which is a whole other thing that I'm not going to jump into now. But just to say that, you know, it's not over, and there's so much more information that you need to be aware of so that you can make informed choices, not just for yourself, but for your partners, for your friends, and for everyone else. I don't know if I've drifted from the question a little bit, so I will end by saying this. You know, during COVID, there was so much suppressed sexuality, especially within the MSM community, that I know for a fact there was sex parties happening everywhere. And Trinidad was very, very blessed in that we were one of the countries named as having, you know, the best kind of response to COVID in how we dealt with it and how our government responded to doing what needed to be done. However, if people looked at COVID and recognized it was kind of like what HIV was, all of a sudden people knew that there was this thing that could kill you. We knew that it was affecting some persons from some communities, but everybody was at risk. And all of a sudden you were afraid to touch people and you have to wear a mask. And all of this is what happened during HIV. During HIV, when persons, during the AIDS epidemic, when people came in and they hadn't gotten treatment or care as yet, nurses were dressing up as if you were radioactive. They were wearing that full hazmat suit and gloves on their hands and all this kind of stuff, and afraid that if you cut or tore the protective clothing that they were wearing, that they could catch it too. So much of the experience of COVID is actually a microism of what people lived through during the AIDS crisis. And the HIV crisis is not over. We are still living in a time when misinformation is the biggest killer, rather than having information and being able to do something about it. And for anybody who needs to get more information, I'm going to drop in the site for PAM. Once again, it's PAM, which is the Patient Advocate Mission. And if you have questions, if you want to find out more, if you want to ask questions anonymously, reach out to anybody on the panel who might have a contact for me. Talk to Rudy, talk to Faye. I will answer as many questions as I can off of this line or at any point in time. But on a positive note, it's about living with HIV and not dying from HIV. And there's so many positive role models, you know, so come out and get more information and be informed and recognize that this is not a scary thing. I like to tell people that it's just like diabetes or high blood pressure or anything like that now. There is medication and it's free. Dudes, come in, get tested, find out if you're positive, and if you are, it's about adapting to a new lifestyle. That's all it is. Thanks.
Thank you for that,
Thanks so
Conrad.
much, Conrad.
Yeah, that was amazing. Before I go on, I just want to say there's a quick comment from Friends for Life. And it says, for young people coming out, it is so important to find that 2 or 3 people who support you. Also be unapologetic. There are many ways to be gay and out. Find your way and live out loud. For us and the older community, we need to put more and more content out there. If you Google gay in Trinidad and Tobago, the youngins should find content that they can consume in comfort and safety. PrideTT is also a resource. We have had, how many? 2 weeks. This is the 3rd week of different types of discussions, conversations. Go back, view the lives, reach out to the different groups, to the different panelists, or to any one of us when we put you in touch with anybody else. Amanda, I was to come to you for so long, but Shahan, go ahead.
Last question. How can, this for any one of the panelists, how can we stop discrimination that LGBTQIA persons experience from other people who are part of the spectrum?
From other people who are part of the
spectrum, the LGBTQIA spectrum.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't get the word. Yeah. Amanda, you're brave enough to take that one?
Well, I think she is. Go strong, Amanda.
Yes, I'm glad for the question, because within the queer community, there is so much discrimination against transgender persons, and it's really based on sheer ignorance in some instances, and it's really disgusting. I mean, within a community such as ours that is already vulnerable, we have this group that is even more vulnerable, and almost every other day we hear of another terrible murder of a trans person that took place somewhere in the world, and has really become a crisis in the international community. And even in Trinidad and Tobago, we have had cases in which trans persons were either killed or attacked violently. And the community, the queer community, in which they're supposed to feel safe, in which they're supposed to feel supported, in which they're supposed to be assured that they can come to for reprieve from all of that, this same community also reflects a lot of hatred towards them, and that's terrible. And I think, well, one of the things I hope to see in the coming years, and I hope that coming generations will correct these terrible injustices, is that trans persons can feel more accommodated, can feel safer, can feel more represented, can feel more included, can see themselves, and that these things of course be meaningful and not just tokenism. So that's what I have to say. I'm sorry, Faye, but this point really gets me aggravated, because I wonder sometimes about the queer community, like a community that has been so oppressed for so long, and it is clear to me by the way in which trans persons are treated within the community that we have internalized so much of that oppression that we are just now reflecting it back on members of our own community. And it's really unfortunate. And I hope that in time, as a community, we could deal with some of our own trauma so that we could be better for other members of our community, because they are clearly at a more vulnerable position than we are, and we should be doing better for them.
I totally agree with you. It is why PrideTT put trans in the spotlight last year, and we continue to do it this year, and we will continue. We launched the the Sasha Fierce Memorial Fund last week, was it, or week before? And that is about raising funding to assist with programming to the benefit of the trans community. And you talk about, Conrad talked about trauma and stuff with HIV. There's a comment from David S. that says, many long-term survivors of HIV were re-traumatized by the way COVID was or is handled. Even more scarier was the isolation and depression. I mean, not being able to touch somebody or being around or having somebody come over to your house. You're already isolated. You're dealing with your sexuality, your orientation. You want to talk with somebody. You want to be hugged. You want to be thought of as being okay, and we can't do it. It's just very difficult. Yes, Wayde, you're waving. Hi.
Yes. I also want to bring up another issue that's been, ever since I was young, it's been happening in our community too as well. When we talk about how we discriminate against ourselves, very often we like to tell our own selves, you are not pretty enough, you're not sexy enough. And we make fun of our family members who do not fit that sexy calendar body look, or do not look like a supermodel, or do not fit into whatever stereotype we assume that the community is supposed to look like. And that is something we need to address. And we have to learn to, each one of us, address our own personal prejudices, those little things that we think is sexy and attractive to us, and learn to appreciate everybody for who they are. And I think if you are having a problem of discrimination from someone in the community, tell them to fuck off. Because you don't need them. You just need us. We love you.
No, but Amanda's point is well taken. We ourselves, and I agree with all of you who are saying that we're on our journey, and our journey is still happening. But we've had to deal with internalized homophobia. We have all the other phobias too that the rest of the wider community has. And we have to address how sometimes we may feel uncomfortable because of how somebody is presenting, how it makes us feel. Let's be honest about it. Sometimes we are uncomfortable with it. We are uncomfortable in whether or not, if I'm close to somebody, who else might think what of me because of who I might be next to, that sort of thing. It does come up. It comes up at work. It comes up at play. And we have to be honest with how uncomfortable it is, and we have to address that being uncomfortable before we grow. Yeah. Shahan? Any more questions?
Give me 1 second. Let me just run through the
It's 10:05, and we begged our panel.
Our panelists for half an hour. So guys, if you
I'm very conscious of the time.
If anyone like who are on the live or Zoom, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us directly, Faye, myself, or Rudy, or just shoot us a message on PrideTT or Pride UE, and we'll try to get those answered for you, because we do have to respect our panelists' time. I just begged for a half hour. I have 24 minutes remaining, so I would like to get through the rest of our agenda. Faye, would you like to proceed along our line?
Yes. So this is very important, and why we wanted to make sure we have enough time for this is that we're looking for a lot of engagement here right now with our audience. We've come to this section, and as I told people, a generation gap is very important for me, because of a program that I think needs to happen. And I think each one of the panelists touched on it. And even some of the audience in their questions, you asked for it. So Leslie has been doing some projects, working on some projects that I think are very important, that I think we can replicate here in Trinidad and Tobago. So it is about how we can support each other and cross this bridge of age that we have. And I'm going to ask Leslie to come in now and share the 3 things that she's been doing very much right now. So Leslie, what I'm referring to is your role in G.A.P, your porch limes, and your community chats.
Okay. So in 2016, Buddies in Bad Times Theatre, which is the only queer theatre in Canada, started a project called the Youth Elders Project. So it was connecting queer youth and queer elders together. And we started doing workshops together, and it ended with a stage performance that ran for 7 nights. And it was the first time in Canada that had happened. And I was one of 6 elders, and there were 7 queer youth. The project has continued in different nuances. We did a podcast project. So that's something that you probably could do in Trinidad, where you interview people and you talk about different topics, and then you can play your podcast on the air for people to hear after the fact. We just recently started, since COVID, the Pen Pal project, where there are over 200 participants of queer youth and queer elders, and we have been matched up. So there's an administration component that somebody has to run this project, and it's pairing up queer youth and queer elders as pen pals, and we are using an email format to do that. So you can remain anonymous, but you can remain in touch. And some of these lovely people who are here on the panel today, I would see you volunteering your time to support queer youth who are struggling. And the other thing we've been doing is something called community chats, which we are finding, since we went online, has become even more successful than when we were doing it in person, because of the anonymity of it. And you can do it either through Zoom. Again, it's that youth elder component. And if you find Zoom is not anonymous enough, or people don't have access to the technology, you can call in. So it's a conversation between queer youth and queer elders. You can use Zoom or the phone, and you need 2 people, just like Faye and Shahan are facilitating today. You need a queer youth and a queer elder to facilitate, and the group chooses the topics for conversation. And so all of the Pen Pal project has continued very successfully. We started in May. There are over 200 people participating. The community chats will be starting back in September. When we went from in-person to online, we had people from across Ontario, because it was more accessible for people to be online than to come to Toronto in person. So I would see something like that being tried in Trinidad. And since COVID, I have started what I call my porch lines. Because of my age and my immune system being compromised, I am not putting myself out there where all kinds of things are happening. But I want to have social interactions with my friends, especially my queer young friends of color. So I've been inviting people over to my porch, and we sit 6 feet apart. The maximum is 3 people, and we have coconut water and doubles if they're lucky. And I usually entertain for about 3 hours, and it's been a huge hit with my queer young friends because they would much rather come and have a face-to-face conversation, and they feel safe because they're not downtown being exposed to people that they don't know, and they know me. So people like Conrad and Gabriella and Amanda and Wayde, I could see you having that role if you're up to it, of sharing your stories, because all kinds of things come out. I just entertained a young non-binary Indo-Trini person this afternoon, and I was telling them about this panel, and they said, wow, this is amazing. It would be so wonderful to be able to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis between queer people in Trinidad and queer Trinis abroad. So that's something else I was thinking of after I had my lime this afternoon. And when Faye sent me the link, I immediately sent it out to my queer Trini friends. So Rhoma was on, and Anthony Muhammad was on, and my friend Verlia I saw was on for a minute. So those are the kinds of things I suggest. I also belong to EGAL, which is Equality for Gays and Lesbians Everywhere. Those of you who have worked for the UN have probably heard about it. And we formed the National Seniors Advisory Council. So we meet on a monthly basis, and we talk about ways we can support queer seniors and also support queer youth. And given the wealth of queer history that's sitting here on this panel in Trinidad, I see you, down the road, or sooner rather than later, because who knows when we'll be back out in the world again, sort of coming up with that kind of concept where you are chatting with each other to come up with strategies to support queer youth and to support the work that each one of you is doing, because it's hard to work in a vacuum. You always need that support. And I have to say, from the bottom of my heart, the amount of respect and admiration I have for all of you living in Trinidad and Tobago, going through this crisis and still being here with your heads held high. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And if I can continue to support you in any way, and I really want to find a way to bridge the other gap now between queer Trinidad and queer Toronto. So those are my humble projects.
Thank you, Leslie. Shahan, what do you think?
I think it's awesome. I honestly wish that last year when I came out, that we had all of this, because it honestly would have been nice for me to be able to reach out on a personal level, especially not only last year but early on this year. Not telling out my personal business because it involves other people as well. It not only involves myself, but I had a rough first couple of months into 2020. So it would have been nice to honestly know about all of this and have elders to reach out to, because that was a point in time when I needed people and I needed someone, because I honestly was questioning taking my life in March. And thankfully, to the person who talked me out of it, I still don't know how she talked me out of it, but thankfully she did. And well, here I am now. So, but I honestly wish it had people like that back then. I really look forward to seeing like what Faye has in store. I mean, I might be too young to be a part of the whole other side thing, but I will support it as however possible I can, because I think it's something that we need in Trinidad. I appreciate all the work that you are doing in Toronto, because Toronto is lucky to have stuff like that and people like you doing what you're doing. And hopefully we could take some of, borrow, with your permission, some of your ideas to work in Trinidad, and like you said, bridge the gap between queer Trinbagonians and queer people in Toronto as well. Because I do plan on eventually like moving to Toronto eventually, some point in time in life. But
I'm here. You come.
yes. If I ever reach across, I will reach out, come and say hi and stuff like that. But yeah, I think we need stuff like that down here, because there are people out there who I think it would help, young people, young persons who are trying to still find themselves, um to realize which part on the spectrum they fall, because some of them don't know. They are confused whether they are lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, gender fluid, asexual, and we have so many things, but we really need that. I can't reiterate that more. We really need that, and persons to volunteer to be one of those elders, and young persons like myself to be part of it, but willing to take the elders' advice and be able to talk to them, because young persons now are pretty stubborn and doesn't like to take elders' advice. I, for one, don't. But I will say that since being involved in PrideTT's Pride Month operation, um, I have taken a lot of their advice, and it honestly has worked for me. So I just met them a couple, like a month or so ago. So if it helped me, I think it will be able to help other people. It's just you need to young persons you need to put your ego aside and not be like, oh, I don't want help from these elders. You don't know what they're talking about, etc., etc. But some of them probably have gone through worse than what you have been through, and probably know. You see, Poppy agreeing with me.
He just wants his attention.
Right? They need to put their ego aside, because these people would help you, and just listen to them. Be there. They will be your friend, and they will reach out and help you. That's what they did for me, and it has been really helpful. So my message to the younger folk around my age and probably older than me, right? Reach out. We have so many platforms. Even if reach out to PrideTT, reach out to Pride UE, we have the connections with these elders who are on this panel as well. We could get your info to them or their info to you, and just reach out to them. Listen to what they have to say and listen to what advice they have to give. And you might be surprised. They might shock you in terms of what they have to tell you, and y'all might become really great friends. So reach out to them. Reach out to us if you cannot get a direct contact. Reach out to PrideTT or Pride UE, like I said, and we will get you in contact with them. That's all I have to say.
You're an excellent spokesperson.
Thank you so much.
And I also have to commend Faye, because I met Faye in 2018, and that Faye has been doing a tremendous amount of work and research in terms of queer seniors. And we actually formed a little group when I was there, Queer Trini Elders, the first one in Trinidad. So Faye, thank you for all the work that you've been doing. And yes, and keeping on and on despite all the setbacks you've had in your life, and continuing to be there for queer TNT. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Me working and doing what I do is not possible without all the support from all of y'all, including the entire team at PrideTT and every other group that I have worked with and continue to work with. I've done a little stint with Friends for Life. I've done a little stint with other NGOs here, and it's without, what I do is not possible without the support from all of y'all. Before I ask the panelists for their final comments, because I don't think we have any more questions, I'm not seeing any. If I missed any, please let me know. There is a comment from Velia that she said, I remember going to Trinidad in the early 90s and having the opportunity of liming with the queer trans community there. They may have been older than me. She put some years in there, and then she says they were older than the year she put. But they were instrumental in showing me the ropes. One of those people was Godfrey Seeley, and I am blessed. Godfrey Seeley is a member that we've lost years now, but many may know him, and then you're correct. We need to have our history, because this was a hero to the movement back then, and the youngsters don't know, and we will capture the history at some point in time, even through the stories of others who are telling the stories of Godfrey. We'll get the story of those who have passed before. Things like Pride Memorial is about remembering those that we've lost, but we still need to get the stories. I think it was Rhoma that said, we have our own Stonewall, and it's time boom up that history. The many more stone and bottle the drag queens, trans women danced and ducked from in Woodford Square. That's Trinidad's Stonewall, stoning effeminate gay men in Woodford Square. And it's true. We heard all those stories. I want to thank each one of you all, but I will save thanks again for a little later. Amanda, can I have your final comments? And thank you again for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Faye and Shahan, for moderating this wonderful panel. I think this is great work. When I first heard the concept 2 years ago when PrideTT launched, I thought even then that was fantastic in terms of just bridging that distance between persons who came out of different generational ethos, and being a part of the discussion for the first time tonight just refreshed my mind those thoughts I had 2 years ago. Thank you for the focus of the conversations, and one focus in particular I was really grateful for was the conversation around transphobia within the queer community. And I hope that in the coming days, months, until it is not a thing that we have to talk about with such severity, I hope that we could have more conversations about that, and that we become more productive, and that we be the decent people that we hope to see out in the world, like that old saying, charity begins at home. So thanks to all my fellow panelists, and thanks to all the wonderful viewers who tuned in and shared comments and asked questions. I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. Gabby?
Hi. Okay. Yes, again, really thank you, Faye and Shahan, for doing this. Thank you, Faye, for that invitation. I really was taken aback that that I was considered for this conversation, and I was really honored to be invited, because it really was one of the Pride events that I have enjoyed over the last couple of years. So thank you again. And Shahan, I have not met you yet in person, but maybe someday soon. But I hearing your story and hearing that, you really recently come out and you've had these challenges already with, your life and feelings of suicide. And I just want to say that I'm really grateful that you are still here and that we get the opportunity to meet you and talk with you, and that you could be part of such a warm and welcoming group of folks that really, we're real good people. And and I'm really proud of you, as for taking this step. And I really appreciate meeting you, virtually. And again, look forward to this. Faye, I know you a long time. Leslie, I don't know you, but Canada, I can't promise you that place is too cold. Wayde, Wayde, long time, we good. Amanda, yeah, boy, you just you don't know when people looking at you, people watching you, people thinking, I'm like, what's she talking about, boy? But no, but I really appreciate that comment that you made. And Conrad, well, boy, yeah, long time ago. So, thank you to all of you for this opportunity, and to those out there who are listening and have been asking questions. And so I trying to figure out a way to reach out, but I mean, you could use these folks to contact me. Don't send me friend requests on Facebook, because I don't respond to friend requests. You can inbox me privately and identify you, and we can talk that way. But if you don't use that, if I'm open to conversation, I'm absolutely here for anyone who needs to talk. And again, thanks for this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gabby. Wayde. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
So I would like to thank some people who none of you will ever meet and never know. And those people were my flock, and those people are the reason why I became that brave person to stand up and say, yes, present Miss Balaman right here. Two of those people are Bruce and Margot Bourgeois. I met them in the back of the Shaguanas market in a roti shop, and we became friends for many years. They used to call Bruce the Roti Queen. But they taught me how to be out and how to put yourself out in public and not care about people. And there was a drag queen in my neighborhood called Maureen. And Maureen, I learned from observing her as an older person when I was young, who lived her true self in the 1970s, who would get out on the streets and go by the seamstress in the corner and order up the hot dress and step out on a Friday evening up the Central Shaguanas. And everybody knew it was Maureen. And Maureen did not care. And I'm so grateful to these people that you will never meet and never know. But these are the heroes who I'm sure each one of us has a group of people like that who've impressed in our lives. But they're very simple folk, and they're the people who teach us sometimes the greatest values in our community. And I would like to say to all the young people that thank you very much for listening to what we have to say. Please be patient with us as we get older. We get much more harsh, and we get impatient with you when we are dispensing our wisdom. I believe in young people. You are the future. You will change the world, and this new generation, unlike any other generation, has that power. And I know for sure, and I believe in you, I know that you all will make the world into such a fantastic place. I stand behind you. And I just want to leave with one more suggestion. Each one of you is an individual activist. You don't have to come out and join us and hold a placard up in your simplest, smallest way that you know you can do to make one person's life better. Be an activist for that person. I love every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayde. I'm going to leave the first for the last. Conrad, remember that? So I'm leaving you for last. Leslie, anything?
Thank you, Faye, for inviting me all the way to Trinidad. And thank you, Shahan, for being such an amazing co-facilitator, and for the courage and the strength it takes every day to remain on the planet. Please stay with us. And thank you to all my co-panelists. Nice to meet you, Gabriella, Conrad, Wayde, Amanda. I'm going to respond to your friend request. And please share my email with anybody who, I'm also the same way with Facebook requests. If I don't know you, I'm not going to respond. So I'm more than happy for you to share my email. And I really like Wayde's concept of the flock, that we are a flock and we can help people to stay. And I saw Gabriella doing the, yes. So please consider us. To all the young people in the audience who have been listening, thank you for being there. And please know there's always hope, always hope. And we need to continue treating each other with kindness and compassion and caring and respect, and most of all, love. And however I can be there to support all of you and in your work and PrideTT and the queer movement in Trinidad and Tobago, I am there for you. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Leslie. And now we come to Conrad.
Oh, this has been an amazing experience. I want to wind up by saying, one, as everyone said, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I don't think persons recognize just how empowering it is for us as older folks to have an opportunity to go down memory lane and to be given an opportunity to share openly and authentically. And that is everyone who's trying to get in contact with me, trying to call me on all the different phones, because I've been with you guys for so long. I want to underline the fact that the whole thing about our culture and recognizing that we don't need to look to the stories of, forgive us, Canada and the US and all of that. We have our own stories and our own traditions. The Dame Lorraine is an amazing experience, amazing representation of the trans experience. Or you get behind what we have for ourselves. I want to underline that whole thing about us being a flock. And thank you, Wayde, for that. I remember my flock, which was Joyce Wong Sang and Homing Pigeon, who persons might know as Tony Grant and Roger Bailey, who, when I was a young homosexual, took me under wing and taught me about what was happening in my community and peeled back the curtains to let me see the wonderful LGBT community that I could be a part of. It is really hard to be what you cannot see. President Obama said that at some point in time, and it really resonated with me, because for our community, you don't know what you don't know. So recognize that we are the persons that they can see. And so remember that and recognize to be proud and strong and a good example for the next generation that is coming up. Thank you all so much for allowing us to be a part of this. And I hope we were able to share something from our hearts with all of you all. Big, big love. Thank you.
Rudy, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Shahan. I wanted to say thank you to you and Shahan, because normally I'm the one moderating these panels, and I don't always get to fully absorb and assimilate what is being said in the moment. And I want to tell you all are talking about stories, and throughout Pride, you all will hear me giving these stories every year because I want our history to be properly documented. This idea is one of my pet projects. And I remember when I first shared it with Anthony Medina, who some of you all know is an ex of mine, but my best friend, and also an older person, many years older than I am. But we had one of the best relationships that I ever had in my life. And I went to Anthony and I said, you know, I have this idea. I think that we should get the young people and the older people together to share their stories. And believe it or not, Anthony's.
It's not mine, it's Rudy's.
Mine. Hold on. Yes, believe it or not, his initial response to me was, but what they want to know about us? Meaning, what do young people want to know about old people? And I said, well, I, as a beneficiary of people's wisdom, because when I came out into the community, people like Godfrey Seeley and Cyrus Sylvester were my friends, believe it or not. And I think that that is where I got what people describe as an old soul. But I saw for the first time in Trinidad and Tobago gay role models. I remember the first time I met Brandy, and many people have said this elsewhere. Brandy, of course, is you just see her as an empowered Black woman. And it's only afterwards you find out Brandy's journey. And to then see the truth behind somebody's experience and to then still see them as identifying and being empowered as a young person, 12, 13, 14 years old, those are the things that helped me to become as empowered as I am today, in addition to the privileges and the other support that I had. And if I never say this anywhere else, I want to publicly thank Wayde as one of those persons who, for many years, when I was finding myself, I would go to Wayde's home with other friends, and Wayde and you and Ryan and the others, Stefan, you all were always true to your identity. You always showed us that we could be professionals, we could be successful, we could have a voice and be who we are. And you all never guided us in the wrong path. You gave us fantastic advice. And, you know, last year I thanked another friend of mine, a diva, and he's no longer with us. But we as young people must remember to say thanks to those who helped us while they are still with us. And that is why I started this, because I was fed up of us saying thanks to people after we lost them. And that's important to do too, but we need to say thanks to them while they're alive. So, you know, just to say that role models are critical, and you all as elders in the community, I know it's not always comfortable for you to do this sometimes because you are very open about yourselves, and Faye has done it herself. She was on the last one we had at Cascadia, and she shared some very interesting things with us herself. But no, it's personal to me. And as you all said, it's about sharing our history and learning our own queer culture and showing that life is about success and challenges, and that there is a journey and everybody's experience is different, but you can learn something from everyone and pick it apart and match it. And one other last point from an elder who is also no longer with us. You all remember Raymond. You all remember Raymond. We lost Raymond, ironically, last year. And Raymond was on that first generation G.A.P panel. And this is a story I said at his memorial, and I'll say it again. When I asked Anthony and Raymond initially to do it, Raymond at first was very nervous. He was very, very nervous about it. And interestingly, he echoed Anthony's sentiments. And what I did, they were both at studio one night, which of course we no longer have, but they were at studio one night for a session. And there were some other younger people there. Okay, I think Kate, you were there that night as well, and Siobhan. And I said to y'all, I said, y'all interested in hearing what older people have to say? You remember? And you all were like, yes, yes, we want to know. That was a trick. That was a deliberate trick that I played on them because I wanted them to hear for themselves that you all were interested, because they really thought that nobody would be interested in hearing their stories. And I wanted to really use that as a point to say that in that generation gap, Raymond said to young people, live deliberately. Do not be afraid of life. And that's all I wanted to share and end on, the story of how this all started and why it's important to me and others, and how and what Raymond left with us as an elder who's no longer with us. Live deliberately. Do not be afraid of life. And yes, Faye, one day I will organize all those clips for you and we will get them up on social media.
Well, you haven't forgotten, so thank you.
But thank you, everybody, and I love you all very much. And let's keep supporting one another. And happy Pride! Happy, happy Pride!
Pride!
Thank you so very much to all of you viewing, all who has commented, asked questions. This just, it means a lot to me. What more can I say? Oh, thank you again so very much. Reach out to us if you're interested in the Buddies program. I'm going to try to get all of the emails for those who registered and try to reach out to you that way to see if you'd be interested. Shahan, I'm going to leave it for you to close.
I love how you always leave it for me to close off, I just absolutely love it.
You're so capable.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that thank you all for the sentiments and the praise. It was I'm not really one to to be so out there and public speak, but I bit the bullet since being Pride UE's PRO and realizing that there's so much more I could do to probably help somebody else or be part of and be part of PrideTT and all the amazing work that they are doing. Yes, I plan on sticking around. I think it was just a dark point in my time in like life early on this year where I really considered that. And yes, I do plan on sticking around because I have a lot to stick around for and a lot of promises that I made that I need to keep, because I have this saying, don't make promises if you cannot keep them. And I made certain promises to certain people and a certain individual that I have to keep. So which means I have to stick around a very much while longer. With that being said, I just want to thank everyone. Thank you to Faye for allowing me the opportunity, first of all, to co-moderate and co-host with her. It was, sorry, it was really amazing. I was amazing to hear you guys' stories and how much that I personally didn't know you contribute to the community and learn so much more. I really do hope the offer to be part of the buddy system, because it's really amazing and it's really important that we do such, because you never know when you will need somebody to be there for you. So I just want to say you really need to take up that, and thank you to the amazing panelists who took time out of your daily schedule to be here with us. It really didn't go unnoticed. I just want to say thank you so much. It was really much appreciated. And thank you to all the participants on Zoom and on Facebook Live as well, and for sending all your questions. So thank you so much again for me. I think I could proudly say the fourth edition of Generation Gap, it was a success. And launching Faye's Body System. So thank you to everyone, and thank you to PrideTT for giving us this platform to doing it. So everyone be safe, have a good night, and stay tuned for the other amazing events we have planned for the rest of Pride Month. Thank you so much, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Hugs, hugs. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night. Be safe. Love you all.
Bye.
Happy
Take care.
Pride.
Happy Pride.
Too funny.